Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Community Exchange podcast. I'm Matthew Scott Goldstein, better known as MSG in the industry. On this podcast, I'm talking to the visionaries building the media ecosystem of the future. Together, we cover the challenges, the opportunities, and what's next for our industry. As always, the Community Exchange podcast is brought to you by OpenWeb, the company building a safer, fairer, and more trustworthy internet. Now, we have a great conversation for you. Today, I'm joined by Jennie Baird, Chief Product Officer at BBC Studios and Board Chair of the Ethical Tech Project. Jennie has been at BBC Studios for nearly 3 years, following 4 years as Global Head of Product at Newscorp. She's been working in digital media since its inception. In fact, we almost overlapped at AOL in 2007. Great to have you in the studio today, Jennie. Now, before we talk about BBC, I'd love to spend more time talking about your time at Newscorp, in particular, Robert Thomson. My story is I listened to his earnings call and was blown away by how articulate that man is.
Yeah. Robert Thomson is just an incredible force in media, but an incredibly erudite person across the board. And I just think he's one of the most important people shaping the media landscape today. But to your point about listening to his earnings calls, I like to say, come for the substance, stay for the alliteration.
So at one point in my career, I would listen to 30 earnings calls in a week or two. And there's certain ones I loved and certain ones I'm like, this person's not that good. Like Bob Bakish at Viacom, the guy was impressively smart. I worked for him. When Robert Thomson spoke, I listened. I paid attention. And I thought he articulated some points so much better than anyone else could, to the fact like it felt like he wrote his own earnings calls as opposed to someone else writing it for him.
Yeah. Robert is very close to the business. He's a former journalist. I think he's always a journalist.
There you go. Now that makes sense to me.
And he has a very strong point of view on the narrative that he tells and the way that we shape facts and unearth facts.
He would always paint a beautiful picture of the industry, good or bad. And now that you told me he used to be a journalist, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That's why he's so good at what he did.
This is a man who I think, lives and breathes the media industry, but in particular has such a passion for news and such a commitment to news. And I think that's why you see Newscorp making such an impact in terms of securing the future of independent journalism, media, et cetera, in the face of big tech.
It always came through. So at Newscorp, you did product. Now, I am just fascinated by people who did product. Because somewhere in my career, like I was a data person, I think I could have done product, but product never existed in my career early at Viacom and Nickelodeon. Can you tell me about product, what it means, how you got into it, and what's it like?
Sure. So first of all, product probably did exist then. And I actually believe that product people are born, not made. So you could be a product person having come up through content, having come up through data, having come up through engineering, having come up through design. So what is product? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. Oh, we need a product person, et cetera.
Yes. Tell me more about this.
So what do product people do? We solve business and customer problems with software, right? So
can you say that one more time?
Product people solve business and customer problems with software. So we design solutions that solve a business problem. So a lot of in product, I think more than any other field, being a subject matter expert is very important. So I think it would be hard to drop in to be like the chief product officer of a media company if you really didn't know the media industry or the media business really, really well. But when I say I think that product people are born, not made, like it surprised me several years ago when I went to one of our divisions at Newscorp and I met some of the young staff working in product, and they had just graduated with a degree in product management.
And you're like, that's not possible.
I was like, that's a degree you can get because like I learned on the job, and I made every mistake in the book. But I think this thing like in early, when we started working in the industry, and you know, talk about like,
because we're old, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So like say in 1992 or 1994, you might have not been called a product manager, but you might have been called a producer or executive producer. Some people who were project managers were actually product managers. And so like I think especially if you grew up in media as opposed to coming from a tech company where that wasn't a thing, we did kind of other things that were product.
You said solve a business problem. Can you give me examples of business problems that either Newscorp or BBC or other publishers would have that you were looking to solve so I can sort of better understand all this?
Okay, so I mean, user engagement, right? So we need users to come to our website more than 3 times a week.
Okay.
What are ways we might solve that problem? We could do more personalization so that we're delivering personalized recommendations and that they're constantly getting an email ping or a notification that tells them that.
So I assume most of the problems you're referring to is sort of every publisher sort of has these same problems.
Correct.
They just don't necessarily have someone there who's trying to solve and articulate that particular problem.
Right. And I think it is about solving the problem, saying like, and I think the real, I think in many places, the product team is sort of what I would call kind of product delivery team, meaning that they're sort of shepherding a staff of engineers or a team of engineers to build something. Really great product leaders sort of focus on product strategy, and they're real partners of your journalists, editors, and publishers to say, like, what problem are we trying to solve here? And how can we solve that with software? And I'll give an example because this podcast is brought to you by OpenWeb, and I'm going to give an example that involves OpenWeb because
go for it, Jennie.
I have followed this company for a long time. So when I was at Newscorp, one of the things when you're a global head of product or you're leading a product organization from the enterprise standpoint, you're sort of always in this tug of war back and forth between what problems do you solve in the center, in headquarters, and what problems should be devolved and solved in a line of business or a business unit that's closer to the customer.
And Newscorp has 50 or 60 different lines of business.
Lots of different publications. And so, you obviously gain efficiencies by solving problems at the center, but you lose connection to really where your user is and where your customer is. So there's always this dynamic. And so one of the things that I worked on, which were sort of what were global platforms, where if we solved it once at the center, every publisher at Newscorp had the same requirements, had roughly the same needs, and that could work. So one of those problems was commenting and community. And so probably half of Newscorp businesses were working with OpenWeb, and half of Newscorp businesses were working with a different vendor.
Okay.
And I forget what they all were. But one day I was reading on LinkedIn, just scanning on LinkedIn, and I saw that one of the product leaders from one of our publishers posted a thing. Hit me up with your best commenting platform.
You're like, what is going on here?
And
that's not a good use of people's time.
So I pinged him and I said, but your division already uses OpenWeb. That's our standard. That's what we agreed that everybody is moving to.
Right.
So we can have one common platform and simplify our processes and one set of connectors. And he said, yeah, but my editor thinks that instead of having thumbs up on comments, we should have +1. And I said to him, what makes your editor think that +1 is better than thumbs up? And, a platform like OpenWeb has operated this at scale, and I'm sure has done a lot of research
knowing
to
that
show that
thumbs up is better than +1.
Thumbs up gets more engagement. And so, what is the business problem your editor is trying to solve?
You always go back to everyone with that question.
Right. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Because if the problem is the New York Times has +1, so I want +1, that's not actually a business problem. So I think that really great product people are really in dialogue with the business, and the business could be your writers and editors. The business could be your publishers and ad salespeople, the people responsible for your paywalls, so another business problem would be that we need people to subscribe. What's the best way to get them to subscribe? And, probably dynamic paywalls came out of that, as a problem to be solved.
Okay. Were you doing product before your product world at Newscorp?
Yes.
Was this so you were born a product person? You knew when you started working you were product?
I didn't know that such a thing existed called product. I didn't look when we graduated from college.
What year?
1990.
1988.
So there was no digital media.
Correct.
There was no internet.
Correct.
There may have been a guy at school who had an email account in the library.
I bought a computer in college in 1987, and it was this big thing, and I used Excel, and that's about it. And I think there was someone with an email account, and I have no clue how it works.
Yeah. So
there was no product.
There was no product. I mean, there was nothing. And so when we came into this industry, I came into the industry because it didn't exist, so somebody with no connections and no experience could get a job, right? And I was probably one of the first people in New York with new media experience because I had worked on a CD-ROM. I was
the same thing at Nickelodeon. Mark Rosenthal, who I love dearly, called me Computer Boy.
Yeah.
Because I was the young whippersnapper who could do stuff in...
And your job was sort of I can do the IT stuff because you didn't know there was something called IT, and I can, get your email set up, and I can write a little HTML. So if you want to put up a little web page, and, and I literally coded, on Notepad in HTML.
And where we had CompuServe with a little little thing to block the ad on the bottom.
That's CompuServe was not my world.
Okay.
But anyhow, I think that going into this, none of these jobs and none of this business existed. And so I didn't know what the name of it was that I was doing. I was I think my title was project manager, executive producer, but the thing I did was I answered emails from users, once we got our thing built. So this was the Smart Money website, which, was the first big thing I ever did. The first big thing on the internet. And before that, I worked on CD-ROMs. Okay. And but, the great thing when you had a website is there was a thing like email us, and I was the person who received the emails.
You got the emails.
And so I could say...
Did you answer them all?
I answered all the emails. And there was a point where I was is this a good use of my time answering all these emails? But, you really got to know what your customer wanted. And so I think that, when we talk about solving business and customer problems, you start to say, you can go to your editor or your head of sales and say, people are emailing me a lot that they need, that they want more stories on this, or they would love if there was a calculator that could tell them, what mortgage to get or whatever. And so that is where a lot of the product mindset comes from. So I think product people are people with a great sense of empathy who understand they can put themselves in the user's shoe. They can validate that with data. And they understand how to use data to understand what users want, but they also can read emails and read the room.
Yeah. And I also think product people are typically the really smart people who can understand, like you said, all aspects of the business. And it's not easy to do.
It's not easy to do. And I think that's one reason why subject matter expertise really matters in this field, because you do need to understand enough about content, understand enough about the business model and the commercial models that drive it, understand user behaviors. So and I think you have to have, for this field in particular, Gibson Biddle, who's one of the product leaders I look to, says great products are built on great data and great visual design. And so I do think having a great design sensibility. I think the other skills that product people need is a really clear sense of vision. So where are we going from here? And a lot of times you're inventing things. So there's a lot of storytelling, which is somebody says, I want to do this. And then you sort of have to tell the story of what this is and shape it and sort of create a world in which people can sort of get on board with that story and they kind of know what they're building and know what they're going to. So there is a lot of, I think, the skills that would bring you into media, like storytelling, that would take you there.
So my takeaway is, once again, it's even more complicated than I thought. And the people who do product well are exceptional, and they deserve to have so much not power, but so much authority inside the company, and you have to trust them to actually build something great.
I would concur.
Okay. So
I think it's an important job.
So you're at Newscorp doing product, smartest person in the room.
I was not the smartest person in the room at Newscorp, and I just want to say that Robert Thompson was definitely the smartest person
so you're number
in the room.
two.
And one of the things about Robert as a CEO is he was really deeply engaged in product. He had a lot of ideas for product, and in many ways was the chief product officer of that company.
And I think if you have a CEO who has really a product background, that's the magical way where you run a media company. And it doesn't happen that much in today's world.
Well, and I think one of the things that people fail to realize is how much your product can drive your commercial strategy, your monetization strategy. They do go together. And I think a sort of false thinking, and I think a lot of media companies are run up the sales side of the business, right? Like on the publisher side, without realizing that actually product enables, like if you have a good product, you have built all your commercial capabilities in, and it makes your sales process so much easier.
Better. Okay. So how did you get from Newscorp to BBC? And was it BBC and then BBC Studios? How did that happen?
Sure. So I am at BBC Studios. So I just want to say I loved my time at Newscorp. It was a really important time in my life. I had a home at Dow Jones because my first web job was at Smart Money, which was owned by Dow Jones. Okay. So I had a history with Dow Jones, and going back to Newscorp many years later, which did not own Dow Jones when I worked there previously, but it did feel a lot like a homecoming. A lot of the same people were still there, sort of a lot of the same problems. I mean, Wall Street Journal, what a great brand.
Amazing brand.
And I think the first to bring subscriptions to the internet, certainly the first successful subscription business on the internet. So that was a very comfortable place for me to be. But I also was ready to I wanted to be more on the business side and have an opportunity to actually impact the business. I was recruited by BBC Studios to lead the global news business, or what we call digital news and streaming. And the idea was, how can we maximize the value of our news and factual content outside the UK, so internationally, globally. So that would be like the BBC News app, the bbc.com website, streaming asset we have called BBC Select. And that's sort of, how can we optimize and maximize the value of that, grow our digital presence around the world for news and factual, which is obviously the signature thing for the BBC outside the UK. So that is the job I came to BBC Studios to do. I guess it was less than 2 years later, we relaunched the BBC, bbc.com, and what we now call the BBC app, because it's not just BBC News. It has news, sport. It has a lot of other great factual content, audio and video. You can now watch BBC News live streaming on the BBC website and app and on FAST channels. So we did a huge amount of work in a very short time, especially for a public service company.
Did you spend a lot of time in London?
I spent a lot of time in London or on calls with London, because there's also like the public service side of the BBC and the commercial side of the BBC, which is where I sit. And so these things are very closely related, because we at BBC Studios commercialize a lot of the great content that is produced within public service for a UK or a public service audience. So I had a lot of relationships there. I think it was a very sticky and tricky job that was a lot about coalition building, understanding a different kind of business and different kinds of business models, being in a very public service values-driven business of content creation, meeting with a commercial business that's trying to double EBITDA to support that business. I mean, it's very, very different. So I did that the first 2 years, and then I was asked to step into this role as Chief Product Officer for BBC Studios, working across the whole company on all those sticky digital business problems.
And how big's your team of product people?
Oh, this is the best job in the world, because all the people report to other people. So
you're like a one person.
I'm like a one person.
You're like the big influencer.
I'm a big influencer. I work with all the teams across the BBC and across BBC Studios.
So that's why we get along so well, because like you're just like an operator of one. And I'm sort of like an operator of one too in my consulting career.
Now, but I mean, and I know we want to talk about this. I think there's like a time in your career, like I love being an operator. I think I'm really good at getting stuff done. I think I'm an excellent operator. I love managing a team. And also at age 56, I know that my job now is to help raise up the profile and the skills of all the people who are the next generation of leaders who will take this forward.
Right. You feel like you want to give back and help those people around you and make them all smarter.
Yeah. I mean, I think, how do you scale yourself? It's by training the people who come next, right? And mentoring them and just sort of being there to help them, talk through whatever their tricky problems are.
And it's very rewarding be able to mentor someone and watch that person grow under your guidance.
I'm going to cry because I have one person in particular who I have worked with for 19 or 20 years, I think since she was 19 years old. And she now is the main product person working on BBC.com. And to have seen her grow from being an illustrator and a cartoonist to learning to code to becoming an expert in CMS to UX to being somebody who I think is probably one of the most respected people across the company in terms of creativity, problem solving, collaboration. I mean, that is, I feel.
Do you want to say her name and give a shout out or no?
Can I give a shout out to Martina Fugazzotto, who to me is just, to me, of all the things I've accomplished in my career is, shepherding her along. And I mean, she deserves all the credit for that, but working with her has been probably one of the most rewarding things.
Okay. So in addition to working at the BBC, you're also the board chair of?
The Ethical Tech Project.
Okay. So I went to one of your events and I loved it because I hung out with Jonathan Bellick, who I haven't seen in 20 years. But tell me more about the Ethical Tech Project.
Well, can you give a shout out to Jonathan Bellick
Absolutely.
too? So Jonathan Bellick worked at Smart Money at Dow Jones as well.
And I knew him at DoubleClick.
Before he went to DoubleClick. And Jonathan Bellick is one of the people who I think really created what we consider the sort of ad tech that we know today, and then sort of moved into a role at Jigsaw where he is much more focused on things like responsible tech for good, ethics, and so forth. And so that's how Jonathan wound up there. And now I think he's leading the Berkman Klein Center up at Harvard, which focuses on, I hope I don't get this wrong, but more ethical social platforms or using platforms, and some innovation there. So,
and does that sort of delve into Gen AI and what that means as well? So
I'm not sure at Jonathan's place how much they're doing Gen AI. For definitely ethical tech, we're very focused on Gen AI.
You have to be today.
I think sort of the acceleration of, we've all been doing AI for a while. If you've been doing content recommendations or, dynamic paywalls or anything, you've been doing AI for a long time. Gen AI and the hype around Gen AI, but also sort of just the big leaps it's made in the past, 18 months, that pace of change and the accessibility of those tools to so many people, I think makes the work of Ethical Tech Project much more urgent. And we're working really we're really focused on training builders, meaning engineers, product leaders, marketers, entrepreneurs, people who are bringing products to market to make sure that, rather than move fast and break things, they sort of shift their mentality to think first, then make things, and make those things better for individuals, for society, and for your business.
Okay, I want to ask you a couple more questions before we wrap up. I've been thinking about this a lot, and you're the perfect person to ask. The news and information publisher of the future. So fast forward 2, 3, 4, 5 years, Gen AI, LLMs, the whole thing. Any sense of what that looks like? Like, just for me as an example, I will love my news like sent to me in the morning at a podcast at 1.75 speed. If I like it, I can double click and get some more information. And when I walk my dog, I listen to stuff. But what do you think the news of the future looks like? And what do these websites or whatever they are evolve into? Any ideas?
Well, one, you are a product person because you just articulated.
I told you I was a product person.
Yeah. You just articulated what that product is. And I think that product would be very interesting for a lot of people. I think in terms of Gen AI and AI for publishers, already publishers are doing a lot of human in the loop work using Gen AI and AI on the back end around things like summarization, doing sort of testing of different kinds of headlines.
But it doesn't feel fundamental yet. It feels like everyone's making little incremental pieces, but nothing has fundamentally changed like when Zuckerberg did the news feed and the whole world changed because of social media and Facebook.
Yeah. No, that has not changed yet. But I think that, let's see, I'm going to say for news publishers, I don't know that you're going to see that momentous of change because Gen AI requires some kind of history in order to generate, right?
Okay.
So like if it's news and you've never seen news, if the thing has never happened before, how can you generate it? That's like, you would have a whole, like maybe there's like, and this would actually be a very cool product, just a news hallucination product, which is, based on everything that came up till now, a Gen AI, what's going to happen tomorrow? Can you?
That's a really interesting idea.
And it might just be very funny. Like it might be funny, it might be interesting, it might be weird, but it's not going to be true, accurate. And it you know what I mean. But it might be interesting. There are a number of aggregators who are already doing Gen AI products. So I actually sent you over, and now I can't remember the name of Mark Riley's startup. Do you remember what it was called?
Human, I don't remember.
I am going to feel very bad about this. So if we can just look it up. But
you talk, I'll look it up.
Okay. But this is, I get a weekly media and AI newsletter from this product, from this platform, which basically generates a newsletter.
Media Metamorphosis, edition 11.
Yeah, so Media Metamorphosis.
Hana.news, HANA.news.
Okay, HANA.news. It is the platform and it is the company that is generating AI newsletters that are very targeted. So I think they target to specific industries.
Just for me, I want that read to me in the morning via podcast at 1.75 speed.
Yeah. So Mark Riley, are you listening to this? Because that would be the next generation for Hana.news. But yeah, I mean, I think like that seems like an easy thing to deliver what you just asked for.
Okay. So my last question, and we talked about this before, where will you be in 5 years? And I think you have the same answer as I have, but Jennie Baird, where will you be in 5 years?
I will be retired in 5 years.
Okay. And then we want to end of this. So you're 56, I'm 57. I typically never talked about my age anywhere. But I wrote a blog post like 6 months ago and I put it out there. And now I'm proud of my age and who I am. I still think I'm young at heart, have a lot of energy. But like you said, it does feel good to help all the people around us who are younger get smarter as we go forward in our careers.
One, I think we are the luckiest people in the world because we have spent 30 plus years building and creating an industry that has challenged us creatively, intellectually. We've surrounded ourselves with people who are super interesting, who are pushing the boundaries. And that itself keeps your mind nimble and makes you young. So I feel like what a blessing by accident this career has been for people like us. That
couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
And I think, we're both high energy people and we have a lot to do. So I think that this moment in time, it is about connecting the dots. It's about sort of setting up the next generation for the future. And I think for us, probably what retirement looks like is probably not going to be golfing in Florida.
Oh, no.
I think that we'll continue to be engaged in some way in the industry or what comes next. Like I'll continue to do ethical tech. I will probably continue to do some other things that keep me engaged and involved, but I'll definitely be spending a lot more time in my garden after I have spent a year cleaning up my Google Drive.
And I'll be spending more time playing pickleball and dragon boat racing and yoga.
We can go to yoga together.
I love yoga. So Jennie Baird, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.